when I pick that, again, the thing that we do here, as I mentioned in the slide deck, is let's play back what it is the person's asking to make sure that we've got the right thing for them. You're asking for Adobe Professional. You don't need that just to read, right? So kind of clarify what it is they're asking for. There is a cost for this since it's a licensed piece of software. Your manager will have to approve it and then set an expectation time for how long it should take to fulfill this request, in this case, once that manager has approved it. And then if they go in and request that service, of course, it will then create the request in the background, route it to the appropriate individual to go in and work the ticket and do the various things that you would have to do in order to come in and fulfill that. So pretty straightforward of what we're trying to do and capture that. Again, once we downloaded and installed that Adobe Professional, that's a configuration item, and we would want to then link that configuration item to either the user or to the user's machine, again, so that we would have those relationships out there. If you look at change management, it becomes a little, I think, even more important, right? So I'm going to apply some type of change, whether it's a patch or I'm installing something, I'm upgrading something. Part of the change manager's job is to find an appropriate time to do it. So I've got to know how dependent people are on that particular, we'll say, server. While this doesn't have a failover server, it's a standalone server, it runs these applications. Therefore, I know I can't take that down during business hours, so let's schedule that change for after hours versus, oh, here's part of a server cluster running these applications. If it's really important I get that patch applied, I could go on and take them down one at a time and do that because we really wouldn't lose the ability to come in and continue to run that particular service. So having that level of detail becomes very important in there. So if we think about putting in a new service request, again, it's very similar to the way that the way we were talking about it within the incident form, that once I come in and I identify, what type of change we're doing, what's the category of the change, what's the urgency of the change, what's going to be my scheduled start date and time, when we're going to try to be through with it. We'll say on the 22nd here at 8:35. So once I've done that, then I can talk about, well, what are the configuration items that are going to be affected by here? Well, here let's say we'll make this one actually patch a particular router that we've got out there. So again, I could go out here and say I need to identify the particular router that we're going to be patching here. So I'll go ahead and search, and I know I've got one out here called home router. So I'll return that as the selection of what's involved in this. And of course, it may be multiple configuration items here, right? I'm going to take out a switch and two routers that we're going to replace in a given office. You would want to identify all of them. And then, again, this is not meant to be a change management demo, but once I did that, that's where then, once you save the record and all, you would go out and identify the task and the order of the task that needed to be done and so forth to be able to go in and kind of do that. And if you just want to kind of look at one of these I've got out here, this was an earlier applied patch I did where you can see that we went out, we identified what was going to be involved in it. We then identified what are the steps or the individual subtasks that have to be performed. These could be sequenced if necessary, or they could be done in parallel. But the real key here is when I'm analyzing the risk of doing the change, I'm identifying those CIs and understanding, what those dependencies are as we do that. So let's actually go look in our Cmdb and kind of see what we've got out there, right? So I've been leveraging it through incident and change and service catalog thus far, but if you go directly into the Cmdb, or if you double-clicked on one of those items when you did the link here, what a Cmdb does is it comes out of the box with certain containers, or what we call CI types, that are typical for IT. So we've got servers, we've got software, we've got network devices, we've got contracts, typical types of things that you would want to relate together. And so once you identify those devices, the CI types here, Then for each CI type, there's generally an attribute. Here are the things we want to track about a server, which are different than the things we want to track about a piece of software, et cetera, et cetera. So we give you that data model, if you will, right out of the box to be able to come in and do that. But the nice thing about that is if there are some CIs that you need in your organization that maybe aren't in our model, it's very easy for you or us to come in and create new configuration item types. And there's really just a little button here that says administration, and one of the options is I want to create a new CI type and its attributes, or I want to create a new service request template like you saw me request that Adobe Professional. And then as you're in here working on this, let's just pull up one of these devices, that router that we just did the change request on. So what you're seeing here, these are the attributes that we have elected to say that we're going to track about routers. Again, totally configurable by you for what your environment might demand there. But the nice thing about it is once it's in the configuration management database, I can see, everything that's happened. Here are all the issues around that. So it looks like I've got a couple of things here where we had some issues with that router, and they are there. Here are the other CI relationships. So these are things that I've said are connected in some way, logical or dependent-wise, to this particular router that we have in there. So as you can see, there are a number of connected laptops and servers here that are accessing through this particular router, so those relationships get established. So I can very quickly see if I take this router down, all of these people will lose access, is what this is kind of implying to me there. I can get that more granular. Looking at that particular configuration item, in this case a router, how many relationships to other CIs are there out there? How many incident requests have been out there? How many change requests, service desk, releases, whatever modules we're running, this is kind of where your accumulated history comes there of what you've done, and the actual value change is kept here in the history file, right? On a given date and time stamp, what did we do? What changed? What did we add? What did we take away? Did we change an attribute type? All of that will be tracked in your history file, and of course that is a reportable field as well. And then for those of us who like the eye candy, you can actually come in from a visual standpoint. Here's that particular router. Well, if I want to really see all of the laptops and the desktops that are coming through that router, I can just click here and it will very easily give me more of a graphic that I can kind of come in and see what's going on with it. So from a Cmdb perspective, it's the ability to, of course, have them so I can build the service histories from my incidents and change requests. More importantly, or at least as importantly, I can establish the relationships to other CIs, which really helps you out in change management, perhaps more so than anywhere else. And all of this becomes reportable. And again, the way I got those CIs into the CMD to begin with, right, all this list of all these various configuration items was either through a spreadsheet, through some CVS file, some other discoveries database, relational database, so, an SCCM, for example, BMC's own FootPrints assets core discovery tool, or as I mentioned, the other way would be to leverage the ScanStar tool that RightStar has developed here. So let's take a quick peek at what that looks like. I'm going to pop over here to an interest in another implementation of that and see if we can take a look at what we're doing there. Let me get my Windows device connected again. Somehow it's lost its connection.
Well, Roger, while you're bringing that up, there is a question that came in, and you can go ahead. And the question here is, instead of using the handheld device in an app, is there an app that can run on a smartphone? So like a native application on iOS, on the iPhone, or potentially on an Android of some sort? And the answer is not currently. However, we're looking at that because it's an app world now. We certainly understand that, and everybody wants an app. And then you would, at the same time, you would probably either get a connector for your smartphone because a lot of the smartphones aren't very. If you're going to do a fair amount of barcode scanning, it's taking a picture, and it's not quite the same thing.
Exactly.
But we certainly understand that space. So we want to watch that and see what we need to do there.
Right.
So
as things happen sometimes, I've got some kind of little issue here, but again, just to kind of maybe review it over here, and we can give you guys a drill down at some future time. But with the device, and one of the reasons it's not an app today is usually your small devices do not have the amount of memory that would be necessary to synchronize one of those devices, because that's the real key here, is that when someone goes out into the field with the device, it is synchronized with the FootPrint Cmdb, and that way you're able to go out and do everything in a remote location. So when I go to my receiving module, I basically sign on. As I said, I identify what it is I'm receiving today, where I'm receiving it to, your warehouse normal locations, what model is it, because typically you don't get 13 different models that come in at the same time. You kind of order groups of machines. Not that you couldn't do that. And by the way, we do have signature capability right on the scanner. So when we're receiving, we can bring up our signature block. You take the stylus that comes with these scanners. Somebody can sign for it right there. And again, the real key is it's so much more accurate than trying to key in those long asset tag and barcode tags that you have there, and it just is a lot more efficient in doing that, and then it creates it on the back end. And then, as I mentioned, you've got your middle module where you're doing your move, add, deletes, or your tracking. So I'm taking an asset out of inventory and I'm reassigning it to Dick, who's in the Vienna location, or I'm moving these 10 monitors from headquarters building to our office down in Atlanta. So again, a very quick way to do that. Some of the questions people normally ask there is, well, as far as the location goes, could you put a barcode on the building and scan that to say, okay, now I want to associate all the devices that are assigned within that building? And the answer to that is absolutely yes, you can. You can do that. So this becomes a very useful module there. And then last but not least, I won't go back over this, but the ability to go out and do that verification part. So let's maybe kind of open it up for some general Q&A here on what we've seen, Cmdb, service catalog, and ways of loading them.
Yeah, and now would be a good time if you wanted to submit a question. Please go to the Q&A box and type that question in. But I'd like to start, Roger. So I wanted to talk a little bit about asset management effectiveness, right? Because I think if you look at the results of the poll that we had, and in fact I was just talking with a CIO not too long ago, and I said, well, what about asset management? Is there a lot of assets that are really leaking out of your organization? And I didn't really expect him to say, get so excited about that, because I thought, well, asset management's been around for a while. I think most organizations probably have this somewhat under control, but the answer was that they certainly didn't have it under control. And I think this gives you a good foundation to begin to do something. One of the things that you didn't really touch upon too much is integrations from the discovery side, right? So a lot of customers, and maybe not a lot, but some of the customers out there may be running Asset Core, right? And so they would want to be able to integrate Asset Core into Service Core. How would that happen then?
Yeah, well, actually, that's as you might expect, that's an out-of-the-box integration that we have. So as soon as we do that, as soon as we put in Service Core with FootPrints Asset Core, that connections are there since they're both obviously from the same manufacturer. So that's pretty easy. And then it does the discovery, the deep dive on what's installed on this machine, how much memory, how much RAM, all very useful. But then we'll take the core information about that asset and we will automatically create the CIs over within the Cmdb, and then you'd be able to leverage it just the way you saw it. And as I did mention, we could, if you didn't have FootPrints Asset Core but you had SCCM, there's an out-of-the-box integration for that product, as well as we can always integrate with download spreadsheets and that type of thing if that's where you have your assets listed. So all viable ways of getting that information in there.